I took a night job watching a forest fire lookout tower. There are rules, and something in the woods that pretends to be people. I took the job because it paid more than anything else I could find. That's the honest answer. The listing was simple. Night fire watch, Blackridge Forest pay, 25-hour shift, 10 p.m., 6 a.m., housing provided, no experience required. At the time, I had been unemployed for 3 months. Rent was overdue, my car was barely running, and the only job offers I was getting were 0-hour retail contracts. So when a job offering $25 an hour to sit in a tower in the woods showed up, I didn't ask questions. That was my first mistake. The tower stood deep inside Blackridge Forest, about an hour outside the nearest town. It was one of those tall wooden lookout towers built sometime in the 1970s. You've probably seen pictures of them. 4 wooden legs, a staircase spiraling all the way up, a small glass room at the top. When I arrived that afternoon, the forest was quiet. Too quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Empty quiet. No birds, no insects, just wind moving through the trees. A man was sitting on the steps of the tower when I pulled up. He looked about 60, gray beard, old forest ranger jacket. He stood when he saw me. "You must be the new guy." "Yeah," I said. "I'm Daniel." He shook my hand. "Name's Harris. I've been covering nights until they found someone else." His grip was strong but cold, like he had been standing outside for hours. He looked at my car. "You drove alone?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." I didn't know why that mattered. At the time, I didn't ask. I should have. Inside the tower was a small room with dusty windows on every side. There was a desk, 2 old monitors connected to forest cameras, a radio, and a notebook. Harris leaned against the wall while I looked around. "Pretty simple job," he said. "You watch the cameras. If you see smoke, you report it." "That's it?" He hesitated. Then he reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "Almost." He handed it to me. At the top were the words, "Blackridge Night Shift Rules." My stomach sank a little, because the list was weird. 1. Do not leave the tower between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. for any reason. 2. If you hear someone calling your name from the forest, do not respond. 3. If the radio turns on by itself and someone asks for help, turn the volume to 0 and ignore it. 4. At 2:17 a.m., something may climb the stairs. Do not open the door. 5. If you see a person standing at the tree line waving at the tower, close the curtains immediately. 6. If the forest becomes completely silent, turn off the lights and remain still. 7. If someone arrives claiming to be me, do not let them inside. 8. If the tower door ever opens on its own, run. I read the list twice. Then I looked at Harris. He wasn't smiling. "You're serious?" "Very." "This is some kind of prank, right?" "No." "Then what is it?" Harris looked out the window at the endless trees. His voice was quiet when he answered. "Something in these woods learned how to copy people." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because the alternative was worse. "Okay." Harris didn't laugh with me. Instead, he picked up his jacket. "My shift ends at 10. You'll be fine if you follow the rules." He walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "One more thing." "What?" "If you see me tonight." His face looked suddenly pale. "Don't open the door." Then he left. The first few hours were boring, completely normal. The sun went down around 6 p.m., and by the time my shift started, the forest outside was completely dark. Just endless trees illuminated by moonlight. I watched YouTube, ate some chips, scrolled through my phone. The cameras showed nothing but empty woods. Around 1:40 a.m., I started feeling stupid for being nervous. The rule list was obviously a joke. Just something the old guard did to scare the new guy. I was literally laughing about it when something happened on camera 3. Movement, near the tree line. I leaned forward. A person was standing there, just barely visible between the trees. They were waving, slowly, back and forth. My stomach tightened. I pulled the rule list out of my pocket. Rule 5. If you see a person standing at the tree line waving at the tower, close the curtains immediately. I looked back at the monitor. The person was still waving. But something about the movement felt wrong. Too slow. Too stiff. Like someone pretending to be human. I stood up and looked out the actual window toward the trees. At first I didn't see anything. Then the moonlight shifted, and I saw it. A silhouette standing perfectly still about 50 yards away. Its arm lifted and began waving again. Slow. Mechanical. I suddenly remembered something Harris said earlier. Something in these woods learned how to copy people. My chest felt tight. The thing stopped waving. Then it started walking toward the tower. The stairs outside creaked. Once. Then again. My blood turned cold. Because I suddenly remembered Rule 4. At 2:17 a.m. something may climb the stairs. Do not open the door. I looked at the clock. 2:16 a.m. Another creak. Slow footsteps climbing the tower. One step at a time. And then, a voice. Right outside the door. Daniel? It was Harris. Exactly like Harris. Same voice, same tone. Daniel, it's me. I forgot something inside. My hands were shaking. Because Harris had already left hours ago. And I remembered Rule 7. If someone arrives claiming to be me, do not let them inside. The handle on the door slowly started to turn. Then the voice spoke again, but this time it sounded wrong, like someone trying to imitate Harris without understanding how human speech works. Daniel, open the door. The creaking stopped. Silence filled the tower. And then something outside began scratching the wood. Slowly, patiently, like it knew I was inside, waiting. The scratching stopped. Not slowly. Not fading away. It just stopped. Like whatever was outside had suddenly lost interest. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My eyes stayed glued to the door. For at least a full minute, nothing happened. Then the voice came again. Daniel? It sounded closer now, right against the door. It's Harris. The voice paused. Then it laughed. But the laugh was wrong. People don't laugh like that. It sounded like someone who had only heard laughter before and was trying to imitate it. Let me in. The door handle rattled again. My entire body was shaking. Every instinct in my brain told me to open the door, to help the man outside. But another part of my brain kept repeating the same sentence. Rule 7. If someone arrives claiming to be me, do not let them inside. Outside, the voice spoke again, but this time it sounded slightly different. Not like Harris anymore. Daniel. A pause. Daniel. Each time it said my name, the voice sounded more natural, more human, like it was practicing, learning. Another long silence followed. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, heavy, moving away from the tower. The creaking faded as the steps descended into the darkness. I waited another 10 minutes before moving. My legs felt like jelly. I walked to the window slowly and looked out toward the staircase. Nothing, just darkness and trees. But something deep in my gut told me it wasn't gone. It was just waiting. The rest of the tower felt smaller after that. The walls closer, the windows darker. I kept checking the cameras every few seconds. Every time the forest shifted in the wind, my heart jumped. By 2:40 a.m., I had convinced myself the worst was over. Maybe the rule had been real. Maybe something weird did happen around that time. But it had left. That's when the radio turned on. The radio sat on the desk beside the monitors. Old. Plastic, yellowed with age. It clicked on by itself. Static filled the room. I froze. Slowly. I looked down at the rule sheet again. And there it was. Rule 3. If the radio turns on by itself and someone asks for help, turn the volume to 0 and ignore it. The static crackled. Then a voice pushed through. "Hello?" A man's voice. Weak, distant. "Please, if anyone can hear this." I stared at the radio. The voice sounded terrified. "I'm lost in the woods." My stomach twisted. "Hello?" The voice continued. "I see a tower. There's a light on." My chest tightened. The voice was getting clearer. "I think someone's up there." I reached toward the volume knob. My hand hovered over it. What if someone actually was lost out there? Blackridge Forest was huge. People went missing in forests all the time. Maybe this wasn't part of the rules. Maybe this was real. The radio crackled again. "Daniel?" My blood turned to ice. I hadn't said my name. The voice continued. "Daniel, I'm at the base of the tower. Please open the door." The radio started laughing. That same wrong laugh. Slowly, I turned the volume to 0. The laughter continued silently as the speaker vibrated. Even without sound, I could see the radio shaking with the noise. I pushed the power button. Nothing happened. The radio stayed on. The screen flickered. Then the voice came back, loud again. "Why won't you help me?" The tone had changed. It sounded angry now. "Why won't you let me in?" Something slammed into the bottom of the tower. The entire structure vibrated. I jumped back from the desk. Another slam. Wood cracked somewhere below. Then footsteps started climbing the stairs again. Fast this time. Too fast. The steps creaked violently as something rushed upward. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might pass out. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Then silence. Complete silence. And suddenly, the thing in my headlights had my face. Not similar, not kind of. It was exactly my face. Same haircut, same jacket, same stupid scratch on the chin from shaving that morning. It stood about 20 feet in front of my car, staring straight at me. Behind it, dozens of other shapes watched from the forest. None of them moved. My hands were frozen on the steering wheel. The engine idled loudly in the silence. The copy of me tilted its head. Then it smiled. I slammed the accelerator. The car shot forward and the creature jumped back into the trees as the tires screeched onto the dirt road. I didn't stop driving until the forest was gone. I didn't sleep that night or the next day. I sat in my tiny flat staring at the rule sheet. Because somehow, I had taken it with me. I didn't remember grabbing it. But it was folded neatly in my pocket when I got home. The rules were the same. Except one thing had changed. There was now a new rule written at the bottom in messy handwriting. Rule 9. Once it learns your face, it will try to replace you. My stomach twisted. Because the handwriting wasn't Harris's, it was mine. I tried calling the company that hired me. The number from the job listing was disconnected. The email bounced. It was like the job had never existed. But that night, at 9:40 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. "Hello?" A familiar voice spoke. "Daniel." It was Harris. "You left the tower." My throat went dry. "You said if the door opened, I should run." There was silence on the line. Then Harris sighed. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You were supposed to run back inside." A chill went down my spine. "What?" "You weren't supposed to leave the forest." My heart started racing. "Harris, what are those things?" Another long silence. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "They're what's left of the people who didn't follow the rules." I drove back the next night, I don't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe stupidity. Or maybe something inside me knew that whatever happened in those woods wasn't finished. The road into Blackridge Forest looked different in the dark. Darker, heavier, like the trees themselves were leaning closer to the road. When I reached the tower, Harris was waiting outside again, exactly where I had first met him. He looked exhausted. "You came back," he said. "You said I wasn't supposed to leave." He nodded. "Yeah." We stood there in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been eating at me all day. What are those things? Harris looked into the forest. They're mimics. That's not helpful. He shook his head slowly. They weren't always. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Harris pointed toward the trees. 30 years ago, people started going missing in this forest. Campers, hikers, rangers. At first, we thought it was animals. Then we found one of them. Found what? He swallowed. A copy. We climbed the tower together. Inside, the room looked exactly the same. Except the door. Deep claw marks covered the wood. Something had tried very hard to get inside. Harris noticed me staring. They get curious. That's comforting. He sat at the desk. I stood by the window. So, what are they really? I asked. Harris rubbed his eyes. We don't know. But they learn by copying. First voices, then faces, then memories. My chest tightened, so the thing that looked like me watched you long enough to learn your face. The room felt colder suddenly. Harris opened the drawer and pulled out a thick notebook. He placed it on the desk. This tower isn't a lookout. Then what is it? It's bait. I felt my stomach drop. You're serious? Harris nodded. The mimics are drawn to people. So the tower keeps one person in the forest every night. My voice cracked. You're feeding them? Not feeding. He shook his head. Studying. I stared at him. Studying what? Harris flipped open the notebook. Hundreds of pages filled with handwriting. Dates going back decades. Each page had the same heading. Subject interaction log. My hands felt cold. How many guards have worked here? Harris didn't answer. He turned the page. A list of names filled the paper. Dozens. Some crossed out, some circled, some highlighted in red. What does the red mean? Harris looked at me. They were replaced. A loud thump echoed from the stairs outside. Both of us froze. Harris checked the clock. 1:58 a.m. Good, he muttered. Good? They're early tonight. Another thump shook the tower, then another. Something heavy was climbing the stairs. I looked at Harris. What do we do? He slid a shotgun from under the desk. Follow the rules. The steps stopped outside the door. A familiar voice spoke. Daniel? I froze. It was my voice. Perfect. Harris cocked the shotgun. The voice outside continued. Let me in. Then another voice joined it. Also mine. Then another. And another. Soon the hallway was filled with dozens of Daniels, all speaking at once. Let me in. Let me in. Let me in. Harris looked at me calmly. Now you understand why the rules matter. The door handle started turning. And suddenly, someone began knocking on the window behind me. I slowly turned around. Something with my face was standing on the outside railing of the tower, smiling. The thing outside the window had my face, but up close, it wasn't perfect. Its skin looked stretched slightly too tight, like it had been pulled over something that wasn't shaped quite right. The smile was worse, too wide, too still. Its eyes never blinked. Behind me, the door handle rattled violently as dozens of voices shouted my name. All of them were mine. Daniel. Daniel, open the door. Daniel, it's cold out here. The thing on the railing lifted a hand and tapped the glass slowly. Tap, tap, tap. Harris didn't even look at it. Instead, he watched the clock. 2:03 a.m. Good, he whispered. What do you mean, good? I said. The tapping grew louder. The creature leaned closer to the window. Its mouth opened, and my voice came out. Daniel, I remember when you were 8. My heart stopped. You broke your arm falling out of the tree behind your house. The room spun. That was a memory. A real one. Something I had never told anyone. The thing tilted its head and smiled wider. See, it said softly. I'm learning. I turned toward Harris. You said they copy faces and voices. He nodded. They do. That thing knows my childhood. Yes. How? Harris didn't answer. The tapping on the window stopped. The creature slowly crouched, lowering itself out of view. But I could still hear it moving along the railing. Behind me, the door shook harder. Something slammed against it from the hallway. The wood cracked slightly. Rule 4, Harris said calmly. At 2:17, something climbs the stairs. I checked the clock. 2:05. So what's outside the door? He sighed. Something worse. The banging stopped suddenly. The tower went quiet again. Even the voices disappeared. It felt like the entire forest was holding its breath. Then something began climbing the stairs, not footsteps. This sound was different. Wet. Heavy. Like something enormous dragging itself upward. Each movement made the wood groan under its weight. The thing on the railing outside the window suddenly whispered, "Daniel?" Its voice was trembling now, almost scared. "Don't let it in." My stomach twisted. "What is it?" I whispered to Harris. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he loaded another shell into the shotgun. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. "The mimics are afraid of it." The dragging sound reached the landing outside the door. Something huge shifted its weight against the wall. The tower creaked dangerously. Then a low sound echoed through the hallway. A breathing noise so deep it vibrated the floor. The creature outside the window started backing away along the railing. Its perfect smile had disappeared. "Daniel," it whispered urgently. "Hide." I looked at Harris. "What is that thing?" He spoke very quietly. "That is why the tower exists." The door bulged inward, not from someone pushing it, but from something pressing against it, something massive. The wood bent slowly like cardboard. My legs felt weak. "That door won't hold," I whispered. "No," Harris said. "It won't." The creature outside the window suddenly jumped, not off the railing, onto the roof. I heard it scrambling upward like a terrified animal. Then it disappeared into the darkness. The door cracked. Splinters shot across the room. Harris raised the shotgun. "What is it?" I shouted. He didn't take his eyes off the door. "Something older than the mimics." The wood split again. Through the crack, something pale pushed inward. Not a hand, not a claw. It looked like a huge piece of bone. Long, curved, and covered in deep black veins. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing. Then the bone moved, and I realized what it was. A finger. A gigantic finger. The door exploded inward. The thing that entered the tower had to bend nearly in half to fit through the doorway. At first, my brain refused to understand its shape. It looked like a person that had been stretched taller and taller until the proportions stopped making sense. Its arms hung almost to the floor. Its skin was pale gray and covered in deep cracks. And its face looked like hundreds of faces melted together. Human faces, frozen in different expressions. Screaming, crying, smiling. The creature straightened slowly inside the tower. Its head scraped the ceiling. The room suddenly felt impossibly small. The shotgun fired. The blast echoed painfully in my ears. The creature didn't react. The pellets sank into its chest like they had hit wet clay. Then they slowly slid out and hit the floor. Harris swore. The thing turned toward us, and every face on its body opened its mouth at the same time. Dozens of voices spoke in perfect unison. "Daniel." My blood ran cold. It knew my name. The creature took one step forward. The floor groaned under its weight. Harris grabbed my arm. "Run." "Where?" He pointed toward the window. "Roof." Another step. The tower shook. I didn't argue. We climbed out onto the narrow railing. Cold wind hit my face. Below us, the forest stretched endlessly in every direction. The creature inside the tower reached the window. Its massive hand slid slowly through the frame. Grabbing. Searching. Harris pulled himself onto the roof. I followed. For a moment, We just lay there breathing hard. Then the tower beneath us creaked, loudly. The creature was climbing. Harris looked at me. They're all coming now. What do you mean all? He pointed toward the forest. My stomach dropped. Hundreds of figures were emerging from the trees, all with human faces, all watching the tower, and in the center of them, I saw myself again, smiling. The roof of the tower creaked under our weight. Below us, the creature inside the tower moved slowly like it was unfolding itself. The wood groaned with every shift of its massive body. I didn't dare look through the roof hatch again. Instead, I stared at the forest, at the shapes gathering between the trees, at the hundreds of faces staring back at us. Some of them looked human. Some of them looked wrong. Too long, too pale, eyes too wide. But the worst ones were the perfect copies, the ones that looked exactly like real people, including the one standing in the middle of the clearing. My copy. It stood with its hands behind its back, watching me with a calm smile, like it had all the time in the world. "Harris," I whispered, "what happens if they replace someone?" He didn't answer right away. He was watching the forest too. Finally, he said quietly, "They leave the woods." My stomach dropped. "You mean, they go into towns?" My chest tightened. "How many have gotten out?" Harris didn't look at me when he answered. More than anyone wants to admit. The roof hatch exploded open. The massive gray hand of the creature burst through, grabbing blindly. Harris grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the ladder bolted to the side of the tower. "Down," he said. "You're kidding." The ladder ran all the way to the ground, right into the clearing full of mimics. Harris shook his head. "They're not after us." "What?" He pointed to the hatch. "They're after that thing." The giant inside the tower pulled itself halfway onto the roof. Up close, it looked even worse. Its body was covered in human faces, hundreds of them. And some of them were moving, whispering, crying. The mimics in the forest suddenly started backing away, slowly, fearfully. Even my copy took a few steps back. "What is that thing?" I asked. Harris climbed onto the ladder. "It's the original." I followed him down. Every step felt like suicide. The mimics watched us descend without moving. Some of them tilted their heads curiously. Some of them smiled, but none of them attacked. When we reached the ground, Harris started walking toward the road. I stayed close behind him. The mimics parted slightly as we passed, like a crowd making room. "Why aren't they attacking us?" I whispered. "Because we're not the threat." Behind us, the tower groaned again. The creature was fully on the roof now. It stood at least 15 feet tall. Its body unfolded into the night sky like some kind of nightmare. Then it stepped off the tower. The ground shook when it landed, and every mimic in the forest froze. The giant creature looked at them. Then it spoke, not with one voice, with hundreds. Every face on its body opened its mouth, and the sound that came out was deafening. A chorus of human screams. The mimics scattered instantly, running into the forest, climbing trees, disappearing into the darkness, all except one. My copy. It stayed where it was, watching the giant creature approach. The massive thing stopped a few feet away from it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the giant leaned down. One of the faces on its chest opened its mouth and spoke, in my voice. "Daniel." The mimic smiled. Then it spoke too, also in my voice. "You're getting better." The giant's body twitched. Its arms moved unnaturally fast. Before I could react, one of its long gray fingers shot forward and pierced the mimic's chest. The thing screamed, not like a monster, like a human. My voice screaming in pain. The giant lifted the mimic into the air, and slowly, the skin of the mimic began peeling away, like wet paper. Underneath wasn't flesh. It was something black, shifting, moving. The creature tore it apart, piece by piece, until nothing remained. The giant stood there silently for a moment. Then it turned toward the forest, toward the road, toward us. My heart stopped, but Harris didn't run. Instead, he stepped forward. The giant lowered its massive head, and Harris spoke to it quietly, like someone talking to an old friend. Easy. The creature froze. All the faces on its body turned toward him, watching, listening. "You remember me," Harris said softly. The giant leaned closer. Its enormous hand reached toward him. My heart pounded. But Harris didn't move. The giant stopped inches away from his face. Then something strange happened. One of the faces on the creature's shoulder began to cry. Actual tears. Harris looked at me, and finally said the thing that explained everything. "That's why the tower exists. To remind it what humans look like." We didn't move for a long time. The giant creature stayed there, hunched in the clearing, watching Harris, watching me. Its enormous chest rose and fell slowly, like it was breathing. But the sound was wrong. Too many lungs, too many voices whispering at once. I swallowed hard. "What is it?" Harris looked tired, older than before. "It was human once." My stomach twisted. "What?" 30 years ago, a research team came to Blackridge Forest. They were studying reports of strange wildlife behavior. Animals disappearing. Tracks that didn't match anything known. I glanced at the creature. "You're telling me they turned into that?" "Not exactly." He pointed toward the trees. "The mimics came first. They copy people to learn how to become them, but they don't get it right. They can't understand what makes someone human. So the researchers tried to capture one. That didn't work." "What happened?" Harris sighed. "They brought something back with them." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "They captured a mimic, and they studied it. For weeks. At first it just copied voices, then faces. Then something changed. The giant creature shifted slightly. Several faces on its chest whispered something I couldn't understand. The mimic didn't just copy people anymore," Harris continued. "It started copying everything. Every person it saw. Every memory. Every emotion." My throat felt dry. "And that turned it into this?" "Yes. Too many identities in one body. It broke whatever it was." The giant slowly turned its head toward the forest, watching the trees carefully. "What about the others?" I asked. "The mimics? They're its children. They learn by copying people. But they're incomplete. So they try to replace humans." My chest tightened. "So the tower keeps the original close." Harris nodded. "As long as it stays here, the mimics stay here too." "And the rules?" "They keep the guards alive long enough for it to remember what a real human looks like." The giant suddenly lifted its head. Every face on its body looked toward the road. Something was coming. Headlights appeared between the trees. A truck. Government plates. Harris cursed under his breath. "They're early." The truck stopped near the tower. 4 people stepped out, all wearing dark uniforms. One of them carried a rifle, another carried a metal case. The giant creature watched them silently. The soldiers approached slowly. One of them spoke into a radio. "Target located." My stomach dropped. "They're here to kill it?" I asked. Harris shook his head. "Worse. They want to capture it again." The giant suddenly stood upright. Its full height stretched toward the sky. Every face on its body began screaming. The soldiers froze. The forest erupted with movement. Hundreds of mimics poured from the trees, running toward the clearing, toward the soldiers, toward the road. Chaos exploded instantly. Gunshots echoed through the forest. Mimics lunged at the soldiers. Some were shot. Some weren't. The giant creature stepped forward, and the ground shook. One of its massive hands grabbed a soldier and lifted him into the air. The man screamed. The creature stared at him closely, studying his face, then gently placed him back on the ground, like it had remembered something. More mimics surrounded the truck. Some of them already looked human. Too human. Harris grabbed my shoulder. We have to leave. What about them? They knew the risk. We ran toward my car. Behind us, the forest roared with screams. When we reached the road, I looked back once. The giant stood in the middle of the clearing, surrounded by hundreds of mimics, watching the humans leave, like a shepherd guarding a flock. I quit the job the next morning, packed everything, moved to another city. I never went back to Blackridge Forest. But sometimes, late at night, I see things that make my stomach turn. Someone standing too still on a street corner. Someone smiling a little too wide. Someone who looks exactly like a person I know. But something about them feels wrong. Like they're still learning how to be human. And every once in a while, when I pass a mirror, I catch myself checking something, just to make sure. Because I still remember what Harris said before I left. The last thing he told me. The mimics don't just learn faces. They learn lives. And once they understand someone completely, they don't need the forest anymore.